So we're going to talk about immigration, we're going to talk about travel issues, and we're going to talk about other rules, as I said. So first of all, some warnings. I know that it's brand new information for you, but it is your responsibility to know the rules when you're living in the United States that govern your legal immigration status. The consequences for violating these rules include terrible things like deportation and inability to return to the US. And so it's important for you to know and you to remember. And then also, don't let your friends be your immigration advisors. People have different expiration dates of their documents. They're from different countries. And so even though they might tell you something, they may not know, even though they mean well, they may not know what the rules are for your specific situation. And then also the rules change. So you want to pay attention if we send you email with instructions, because we're going to be informing you about the latest rules and regulations. A few other warnings. We do have to report some information to the Department of Homeland Security in the SEVIS system. So if your enrollment changes, we have to report your enrollment every semester. We have to register you in the immigration system. If you change your address, if you change your major or level, if you drop below full-time, those are all things that we need to report. We don't really want to report them, but we're required to do it in order to bring international students to the university. So if anything for your information changes, like your address changes or your program changes, you need to make sure that you're letting us know and that you're following messages from our office carefully, because we're going to warn you about all those pitfalls and other things that you need to know. We guarantee that you won't remember all of the rules because they are tricky and detail oriented, but when you don't remember, or when it has to do with work or traveling in the US or other things that have to do with your immigration status, you want to make sure that you're asking at the Global Education Office to an international advisor. And as I said in the beginning, please read along with that immigration rules handout that we've posted on your assignment folder in your team on Microsoft Teams. Okay, so first a little framing of this process. It's actually really confusing because the US government has a number of different departments and agencies that are involved in this process. So first of all, there's Department of State, which administers the consulates and the embassies outside the US, and also issues visas to come to the US. And they also maintain the J-1 visa program. So if you're on a J visa, they are the agency responsible for J-1 visa rules and regulations. Then there's the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, which is responsible for immigration rules and benefits for while you are studying in the United States. So they are the agency that deals with your immigration status once you arrive. Okay, so within Department of Homeland Security, then, there are also three different agencies. There's USCIS, which processes applications and provides services to internationals in the US, ICE, which enforces immigration rules, and CBP, which is Customs and Border Patrol. They monitor the port of entry, and that's who you see when you enter the US. So it's two different departments of the government with three different agencies within one department, so it's very confusing to know who's doing what and what all the rules are. Finally, there is the SEVIS system, which is the Student Tracking Program. SEVIS stands for the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, and that tracks and monitors international students. And that's where we have to report your information, so you need to make sure that you're telling us when you change everything. So your SEVIS record has to be up to date and active to stay in student immigration status. Okay, so going to that immigration rules sheet, we're going to tell you about all of your immigration documents. And there are 4 of them for most of you. And these documents are things that you want to keep copies of. So you want to take pictures of them and keep them electronically. You want to keep copies of these and any kind of tax forms in the US for as long as you plan to remain in the US. So keep your documents in a safe place. Safeguard these e-copies. You want to give documents to maybe your family as well to keep for you. And we keep these in the Global Education Office for a limited amount of time during your student status only. So if you leave the university, we won't be keeping those, so you need to have your own copies. You want to carry these documents with you if you travel inside as well as outside of the US. We are a border state, so if you travel south in New Mexico, you will hit a border patrol. So you're going to need to carry your documents with you if you travel out of Albuquerque. And those documents include your passport, your I-94, which I'll explain in a minute, and your I-20 or DS 2019. So these are the documents that you have. You have your passport, your I-20 if you're an F1 student, or your DS 2019 if you're a J1 student. The third document is your I-94, which is an arrival or departure record. And then the fourth document is your US visa in your passport. And I'm going to talk about each of these things. So your passport, what you need to know is your passport has to be valid for 6 months into the future when you're entering the US. So you need to know when your passport is expiring and track your passport expiration. It has to be valid at all times to work in the US. And in order to renew it, you're going to need to either contact your US embassy or consulate in the United States, or you're going to need to renew it when you go home if you're traveling home. You have to also update it with the Global Education Office, and you do that through our portal that we will explain to you later that's called the MyGeo portal. It's kind of like MyUNM, but it's for international students. It's MyGeo, and you can upload documents to that portal. So that's what your passport is. Most of you know the passport, but those are some rules about it. Then the second document is the I-20 if you're an F1 or DS 2019 if you're a J1 student. This is a paper sent to you by the school. For J1 students, in some cases, you're going to get this from an organization and not from the university, but the organization has authorized you to study at the University of New Mexico. You use this form to apply for a visa, so F visa for I-20 paper holders, or J visa if you have a DS 2019. So this form needs to be valid, means it can't be expired, and it needs to be mostly correct at all times. You're going to update the information, or you're going to tell us, and we will update the information if the information on the form changes. The end date on the form is just an estimate. So your permission to stay will actually end if you do not study. So if your program ends earlier or you quit your program, doesn't matter that this I-20 or DS 2019 is still valid, you're still not maintaining your student status. So we're going to talk about that. So this is what an I-20 looks like. It has a SEVIS number at the top of it. That SEVIS ID number that starts with an N is your SEVIS ID number. It has your student information, so your name, your birth date, your country of citizenship, your reason that we are printing this document. So initial attendance is if you're just beginning a program in the United States. And then school information. So University of New Mexico, our school code, and all of the information about your student status. This is the top portion of the I-20. In the middle of the I-20, there are other data points. It has program of study information, so your education level, your major, the start date and end date of your program, which again is just an estimate, but you don't want to let it expire. So this person, they have an I-20 that started August 2019, and it's valid until May 2022, and they would need to get a new one if they still want to study after May 2022, and they'd need to get it before that date. So you need to not let it expire. Then there's financial information, so what the cost of education is when you are being admitted, and then how you are paying for your education. So if you change the source of your funding, so for example, you change from personal funds to a graduate assistantship or to some sort of scholarship, you would need to get this section updated. The amounts change a little bit year to year, unfortunately, but you don't need to get it changed every year just because the tuition has gone up a little bit. You just need to change the financial part if your source of funding changes. On the bottom of page 1 of the I-20, there is a signature from an international advisor, or a school official is what it's called in the immigration world. And then you are supposed to sign your own I-20 here on the bottom, and it should have your name as well, and then the date. So you want to sign it and date it. On page 2 of the I-20, there is a section for employment authorization. So any kind of off-campus work that you're going to be authorized for will be authorized here. and you must have it authorized here in order for the work to be legal if you're an F1 student. We're going to show the J1 document, which is called the DS 2019, in a minute. And then also on page 2 are any kind of changes that might occur during your program of study. There's a change of status. Some other kinds of events are listed here and other authorizations if you have them. So when something happens and you make a change, you'll get a new I-20 and that information will be listed here. The bottom section of page 2 has your travel endorsement. And this is the place where you need to get your I-20 signed if you're going to leave the US once you've already entered, if you're going to leave and re-enter. And this is a signature that verifies that, yes, you have been a student at the university and you're following all the rules. The signature needs to be less than 6 months old at the time you are re-entering the United States. And it has to be signed by a GEO advisor. So this can't be signed by your academic advisor. It can't be signed by anybody else at the school. It has to be signed by a GEO advisor because we are authorized to sign it by the Department of Homeland Security. You want to make sure that you come in at least a week before you travel to get this signature. Right now, during COVID, we are able to sign these electronically and send these to you electronically. But normally we need to sign these in the original in person. So we will see what happens after COVID is over and we return to normal process. Okay, so if you're a J1 student, you don't have an I-20, you have something called a DS 2019. It's kind of the same. Student information is listed at the top. School information is listed there as well. The reason for printing. So what's your category of J1? Are you a student or a research scholar? All of you guys should be students. And then the reason why we're printing this. Is this for beginning a new program or continuing a program? It also has the start and end dates of your program. It's also true that you cannot let this expire and that the end dates are just an estimate of the amount of time it will take you to complete your program. The funding information is also listed here, as well as the program information, what's your level of study, doctorate, master's, non-degree for exchange students, and then what your field of study is that you've been admitted for. It has a signature line from a school official. And then also on page 1, there is on the right-hand side, the place where you get signatures if you're going to travel out of the US. And once again, the signature should be less than 6 months old when you're returning to the US. And those signatures need to be from a GEO advisor. They cannot be from your department. Then on the left-hand side, there is a couple of boxes. One of them is whether or not you're subject to the 2-year home residency requirement, which is sometimes something that comes with the DS 2019 and the J1 status. So if you are subject to this requirement, it means they're going to indicate it here with the reason why you are subject. And it means that you have a requirement to return home for 2 years before you could change to a work visa or permanent residence. If you need more information about that requirement, you can come to the Global Education Office and we are going to give you that information when you come in. You can meet with an advisor and we'll tell you what that means. So those 2 documents, the I-20 for F1 students and the DS 2019 for J1 students, are the first 2 documents that you need of the 4. The next thing that you have, the third document, is the I-94. And you don't get this until after you enter the United States. And when you enter the United States, you're going to go to this website, which is cbp.gov/I-94, or you could just Google I-94, and you're going to get a record to download of your arrival. So this website records when you enter and leave the United States. You need to download this I-94 document because it shows your legal non-immigrant status in the US at the time of entry, and it's needed for any kind of work permission you're going to get and a number of other immigration benefits. So we tell you to download a new one each time you re-enter the US. This is because you want to check it and make sure that they have allowed you to come in as an F1 student. They haven't made any errors. And then you want to keep it for yourself and also upload it to the MyGeo portal. That means giving it to us when you have it. And that's just so that there's a backup copy somewhere if you need to find it. This document does show your current legal non-immigrant status, which is required for proof of your immigration status. So you're going to carry it when you travel out of Albuquerque. You can carry it on your phone with pictures while you're in Albuquerque, but you want to make sure that you are carrying that paper document when you leave the city. This document shows the end date of your status, which if you are a student, you should have something called DS written on there, which is duration of status, which means that you actually have no specific end date, that you could stay here if you're following all the rules as a student lawfully for many, many years, or that you could expire on any day of the year if you violate the terms of your immigration status. So duration of status is actually what international students are admitted for. This is what an I-94 looks like. So it has an admission number for that entry on the top. It has the most recent date of entry. It has the class of admission, which should be F1 if you're an F1 student, or J1 if you're a J1 student. And then it has DS, which, as I said, means duration of status. So that means you're valid to stay here as long as you are maintaining student status. It should have your last name, your first name, your birth date, your passport number at that entry, and then the country of issuance of that passport. Finally, the last document that you have is a sticker with a picture that's issued by the U.S. consulate. It gives you permission to enter the U.S. in a specific immigration status. It does not say how long you can stay in the U.S. So it's an entry permit only. It gives you a window of time to enter the U.S. And so it's valid between the date of issue and the date of expiration for entry in that specific visa status. You do not need to leave the U.S. if your visa expires. So some of you only get a year of a visa. That's because visas are issued based on reciprocal arrangements between your country and the US. So you might only get a year-long US visa, even if your program is supposed to be 5 years long. So if your visa expires while you're here, you don't need to leave the US just to get one. You cannot get a visa from inside the US. But you need to remember that if you do leave the US, then you're going to need to go to the US consulate while you're outside the US and get a new visa to re-enter to resume your program. So the permission is to enter between the date of entry and the date of expiration. And that is what you need if you're coming into the US. But if you're here in the US, you need to have a valid I-20 or DS 2019, and you need to be maintaining your full-time student status. If you do get a new visa, you want to make sure that you upload it to your MyGeo portal so that we have that information, again, as a backup in case you lose it. All right, so this is what the visa looks like. It has your picture. We posted in this opera guy, but it shows the date of issue, sorry, the place of issue. It shows the visa control number. It has your name. It has your passport number. It has the number of entries. M means multiple entry. It has your CVIS number, and it has the visa type. This is an F1 visa. It has the date of issue and the date of expiration. So this visa was valid between June 24th, 2013, and it expired on June 19th, 2018. What that meant was that this person, opera guy, can enter the US or could enter the US as many times as he wanted, multiple entry, between June 2013 and June 2018, as long as he was maintaining all of the rules of student status. So those are the 4 documents that you have for maintaining student status. Here are the rules that you need to follow in order to maintain that immigration status. So in order to be staying for duration of status, there's 10 rules that you need to remember. And these 10 are on that sheet that we talked about. And once again, I'm going to stop my share for just a minute, and I'm going to show you those 10 rules as they appear on this International Student Responsibilities contract. So you see that there are 7 things that you're always required to do. So you must always, and then 3 things that you never want to do. And then there are some other requirements here listed for students, which we are going to go over. Okay, so I'm going to show you the slides again, and I want to tell you that your slides are going to be available when you like on your team in Microsoft Teams. All right, so to maintain student status, you must always attend the college university on the I-20 or DS 2019. You have to provide a correct residential address to the Global Education Office within 10 days of making a change. That's once you come to the US and you have a local address. You have to maintain full-time enrollment throughout your stay as a student. You have to maintain a correct and unexpired I-20 or DS 2019. You have to maintain a valid passport, and you have to speak with a GEO advisor before you're transferring schools. So if you want to go to a different school, that's fine. We just need to move your SEVIS record in the government system to the new school. Finally, you have a grace period that you have to respect after completing your program. And that grace period is 60 days for F1 students and 30 days for J1 students. The 3 rules that you never want to do are you never want to work off campus without prior authorization on your I-20 or DS 2019. You never want to work in on-campus employment for more than 20 hours per week while school is in session during fall and spring semesters, for example, or after you finish your program. And then you never want to take a leave of absence or withdraw from classes or drop below full-time until you speak with a GEO advisor. That's because we're going to give you advice about what you need to do, what are your options for maintaining your status. And you want to do that no matter what anyone tells you. Most Americans have no idea what you need to do to maintain lawful status in the US, and so you need to talk with GEO because we will be able to tell you what is the best option for you. If you're going to leave UNM, you want to make sure that you let us know, and then we can end your immigration record in the most favorable way for you. All right, so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about enrollment rules because this is the way that most students end up in trouble because enrollment rules are kind of tricky, and one of the things that you always need to do is maintain your full-time enrollment. So enrollment rules are different according to your level of study. That means, are you a graduate? Are you an undergraduate student? If you are a graduate student and you do not have an assistantship, you are required to complete each semester with 9 credit hours. If you are a graduate student with an assistantship, you are required to complete each semester with 6 credit hours. If you are an undergraduate student, you must complete each semester with 12 credit hours. These are the immigration rules for your minimum number of hours. If you have an Amigo scholarship, the Amigo scholarship for undergraduates requires 15 new credit hours each semester. So there's a different rule for immigration and for the Amigo scholarship. For graduate students, it's 9 credit hours if you have no assistantship. So that's if you have the Amigo or don't have the Amigo. If you're an exchange student, most exchange students are admitted as undergraduate students. So those who are admitted as a graduate student need to first check with GEO to make sure that we actually are counting you as a graduate student. If you are a graduate student, it will be different. But if you're an undergraduate exchange student, that's most exchange students, you must have 12 credit hours each semester. If you're identified as a graduate student, then you would have 9 credit hours each semester. So what do I mean by finishing each semester with that full-time minimum requirement? Well, there are restrictions on the type of grades that you can have for this full-time minimum. The courses that count towards this full-time credit requirement, so 12 for undergraduates and exchange students, or 9 for graduate students with no assistantship, or 6 for graduate students with an assistantship. So the courses that count towards that minimum full-time number are courses that you finish with a standard grade, A, B, C, D, or F, or with a credit, no credit grade, that's pass, fail, C or NC, or with an incomplete, that's an I. An incomplete will eventually turn into a grade, so you need to make sure that you finish those incomplete classes or they will turn into an F. So all of those classes that have a standard grade, credit, no credit, or incomplete will count towards that minimum number that you have to maintain for immigration purposes. Towards your 12 credit hours if you're an undergraduate, your 9 credit hours if you're a graduate, or your 6 credit hours if you're a graduate with an assistantship. Courses that do not count towards that full-time minimum requirement are courses where you have a grade of audit. Audit means that you're not going to do the work for that class, you're just taking the class for fun. Or if you finish the class and you are given a grade of W, which means withdraw, or you dropped the class, so you did not finish the class requirements. So those are in red because those courses will not count towards your full-time minimum for immigration purposes. And you will get in trouble if you do not finish the semester with the minimum number of credits. This is very important to remember because at UNM, a professor maybe doesn't know you're an international student, they think you're not doing so well in the class, and so they decide at the end of the semester they're going to assign you a grade of W. If that grade puts you below the minimum number of credit hours, we are going to contact you in a panic saying we have to end your immigration status if you do not change that W to a grade, or if you do not add another course, which is pretty impossible at the end of the semester. So it's really important that you understand these enrollment rules and that if you have any questions, that you ask a GEO advisor. And I'm going to tell you that when we meet at our next cohort meeting, you should ask any questions you have about these full-time rules. All right, so there's another restriction, and that is a restriction in the number of online classes that you are permitted to take and count towards that full-time minimum number for immigration rule purposes. So what that restriction is, under normal circumstances, only 3 credit hours of online classes, that means strictly online classes, no in-person requirement at all, only 3 credits of those kind of classes can count towards your minimum immigration requirement. So if you're an undergraduate and you must maintain 12 credit hours for immigration purposes, then you must have 9 credit hours that are in person, so not entirely online. They have some kind of in-person requirement. And then 3 or more can be online classes only, so no in-person requirement. If you are a graduate student without an assistantship, you have to have 6 credit hours of in-person classes, and 3 or more can be online. And if you're a graduate student with an assistantship, you have to have at least 3 credit hours of in-person classes, and then 3 or more can be online. So Only 3 credit hours of online classes is going to count towards that full-time minimum number that you are required to maintain for immigration purposes. And again, please ask any questions you have at our next cohort meeting. Finally, in terms of full-time study, you're required to enroll full-time for fall and spring semester. You do not need to enroll in the summer unless you want to enroll for summer, or unless you begin your studies in summer or end your studies in summer. And in that case, you're going to need to be enrolled in the summer semester. So you guys are not doing this orientation in person, so you don't know the purpose of this meme. That is me acting silly with my bicycle helmet. We have created our own memes. This is my Mrs. Bean routine. So when you see me in my UNM shirt with my neon bicycle helmet, you know I'm being ridiculous, kind of like Mr. Bean. Hopefully you know who Mr. Bean is. So this is me being silly, saying, this is how you feel when you're enrolled full-time for the semester. You feel, yay, I've done all the things I'm supposed to do, and now I'm going to finish the semester as a full-time student. Okay, you might be asking yourself, so what are the exceptions to full-time? When can I be excused from being full-time? So, well, one of those exceptions happened last semester when COVID hit. Immigration allowed anybody who was currently in the US to continue to pursue their classes online for the rest of spring semester and for summer semester if they were attending. We don't know yet what's happening for fall semester, but we will announce it to you as soon as we know. So, under normal circumstances, the exceptions are very few, and they have to be authorized in advance by the international advisor in GEO. There are 2 types of exceptions. One is academic type exceptions, and the other are medical type exceptions. And I'm going to explain those now. For academic exceptions, there are uncommon exceptions and common exceptions. The uncommon exceptions would be something that happens at the beginning of your program, like you have initial difficulties with English language or reading requirements or American teaching methods. You're having real difficulty adjusting to the educational environment. If that happens to you, you come in and we can give you a semester excuse for dropping below the full-time required number of credits. Then there is improper course level placement. That can happen the first or second semester at the university. Let's say you take a class for which you did not have the appropriate background or prerequisites, and for some reason they allowed you into the class, and you arrive in the middle of the semester and you realize that you were not prepared with the background material for that class. Your instructor can write a letter and we can excuse you to drop the class due to improper course level placement. Both of those exceptions, you need to come to us in advance before you drop the class and receive the exception. You should know that those exceptions can only happen once during your academic career, so you want to reserve those for very extreme circumstances. Then there are some more common exceptions for graduate students. If you are finished all of your coursework and you're doing your thesis or dissertation, or you're preparing for your comprehensive exams, you can be excused to be enrolled in the minimum number of credits to undertake those final activities, thesis, dissertation. You do need to complete some paperwork, but that situation can happen in multiple semesters as you finish the final requirements for that degree. If you are an undergraduate and it is your final semester of coursework, so the very last semester, you can also be excused for that final semester only in order to complete just what you need to complete to graduate. So if you only have 6 credit hours to graduate, then you could be authorized to take only 6 credit hours in that final semester. All of these exceptions do require paperwork to be filed with the advisor before we can authorize the drop below full-time or the withdrawal to less than full-time. The other kind of exception is a medical exception, and this also needs some paperwork. You can have a medical excuse, which is authorized by a medical doctor or licensed psychologist. And that letter that you get from the doctor would need to recommend that you drop classes due to an illness that prohibits you from attending classes. So those are the kinds of exceptions that you can get to the full-time requirements. Please write down all of your questions about full-time study, and we will address those at the next cohort meeting. Finally, in this full-time rule section and immigration rule section, I want to talk about your grace period. The grace period is that time, that window of time that you have after you complete the last requirement for your degree. So that may not be your graduation date. Usually if you're taking coursework, you're in a coursework only degree program, you are going to finish with your final semester. So your last requirement for the degree is the final day of this semester. If you are in a program that has a thesis or dissertation requirement, you might finish your program at a different time in the semester. So the completion date is the date that you finish the final requirement for your degree. So once you finish your degree, you have a clock that is ticking, and this clock or this time period is called your grace period. F1 students have 60 days of a grace period, and J1 students have 30 days of a grace period. During this grace period, you have to do something. You have to take some action. And these 4 things on the screen are the kind of action that you can take. You can either leave the US during this grace period, or you can get a new I-20 or a DS-2019 from a new institution or program, or you can apply for post-completion student work permission, or you can change to another immigration status. If you're going to apply for post-completion work permission, you want to make sure that you come in early to apply. If you quit your program, you terminate your program, or you don't succeed in your program and you have to leave your program early, you do not have a grace period. So if you think this is going to happen to you during the semester, you want to come in and talk to an international advisor so we can tell you what your options are. As I just mentioned, if you are going to try to work after your program is over, you can apply before your program is over, even if you don't have a job. And you should be thinking about this work permission and applying for this work permission at the beginning of the semester that you are finishing your program. So don't wait until you finish your program because it will be too late. You want to apply before you complete the last requirement for your degree so that you get the work permission in time. You really want to apply 3 months before you are planning to work. So we do have a different work discussion assignment for you, and you will be watching Carolyn do that work video. So you also want to write down your work questions for our next session. As I said, and as Carolyn will tell you, if you're an F1 student, you do not need a job offer currently to apply for that work permission. So you should just come in as soon as you know that you're going to be finishing your program. If you're on a J1 visa, you have to have a job, and you have to have that job before your current DS-2019 expires. So you want to make sure that you come in and talk to us early if you're looking for jobs. Once you complete your academic program, you also are no longer eligible to work on campus unless your work authorization that you've applied for has already started and the job that you have on campus is in your field of study. So on-campus employment is only going to be allowed as long as you are an enrolled student at the University of New Mexico. All right, so that's a lot of rules and regulations, but we're still not done. Now we're going to talk about travel requirements. So while you're here, and hopefully COVID will end, you will be traveling around the US. And this picture is you with all of your new best friends on the coast of California in your terrible rusty old van, having a great old time. Hopefully that is you next year and we're out of this COVID mess. But I'm going to tell you what you actually need if you're going to be traveling around the US and then outside of the US. So for travel within the US, if you're going out of Albuquerque, you're going to need your passport, your I-94, your DS 2019 or I-20, and your um, uh, if you're in Albuquerque, your I-94 is just, the copies of these are just fine on your phone, whatever. The I-94 is the actual legal requirement. So you want to make sure that you have all of these documents with you if you are moving around the United States. If you are going out of the US and you're returning as an international student, you want to make sure that you bring these things with you. Your passport, which is not expired and is valid for 6 months into the future. Your US visa, which is unexpired. If you're traveling only to Canada or Mexico, you may be able to go there even if you don't have a valid visa. You need to ask an advisor before you go there. Geo advisor signature on page 2 of your I-20 or page 1 of your DS 2019. So that signature that's less than 6 months old, we want to make sure that you have that before you go outside of the US. And then it's also a good idea, these are optional, but they're good to bring proof of your finances for your studies and a copy either accessible on your phone or on paper of your transcript showing that you have been maintaining your full-time status. So those are the things you want to bring when you travel. If you are going to travel, make sure you get a geo signature at least a week before you leave. And if you leave the US after you complete your program, you should know that you cannot re-enter on your student visa. So do not plan to go to Canada or Mexico for a week after your program's over and then come back into the US to fly home. You will not be able to do that. And so we will tell you what you need to do if you want to move around. If you're leaving the US and you're going to need to apply for a new visa while you're outside the US, you do want to talk to a geo advisor before you go to find out if there's any new information about visas and consulates abroad. So this is another one of our memes. This is Mrs. Bean. She says, don't be sad. Make sure you get your I-20 signed before you travel out of the US. You don't want to be stuck there at the airport without your travel signature, wondering how are you going to re-enter after your program is over. Okay, so as I said, if you want to travel after study, you have only the grace period to travel if you don't take any other action, which is 60 days for F1 students, 30 days for J1 students. If you want to stay longer or you want to leave the US during that time and come back in, you're going to have to take some specific action. Do not overstay your visa time. And if you want to work after study, you should apply well in advance of your program completion date so that you can proceed to work without any immigration issues. Those are all of our travel rules.